Here we go.
All right, we are connected to our YouTube live stream. Hello to the audience. Hello to the folks who are watching later. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to start out by saying thank you to Zero Waste Sonoma, the sponsor for Zero Waste Month this year. And if you would like to sponsor, get in touch with us. We'd love to have you sponsor these wonderful people that we're having conversations with and the work that we're putting into Zero Waste Month. In addition to our sponsors, we have our speakers and promotional partners, our collaborating organizations that are participating in Zero Waste Month, posting zero waste actions, sharing zero waste tips, and all things about reducing waste and changing systems. So thank you so much to these folks who are involved. We're very excited to be growing our network and to have all of you as part of this wonderful campaign. So thank you once again to our sponsors and our promotional partners. And now I will introduce myself. So I am Hayden Sloan, the Strategic Director of Communications of Race to Zero Waste. And it's great to be with you all today. So Race to Zero Waste started this campaign a couple of years ago. And we're really excited to have you. So Zero Waste Month is all about just trying to reduce waste. We turn the race to zero waste into a sprint, right? And we also talk about how zero waste is more than recycling, right? It's more than so many other things that we think of as zero waste, right? Fitting all your trash in one little container. That's great, but zero waste goes beyond that too. And that's one of the things that we're here to talk about today, which is PFAS. So it's a little bit of a buzzword right now in the industry. And we hope that you find some interesting and hopefully something to learn about with this conversation and something to take action on, because it's Zero Waste Month and we're here to take action. So our guests today are going to be talking about the importance of paying attention to these chemicals and others like it, the forever chemicals, and what we can do to hopefully try to avoid exposure to these types of things, which could include regulation, government efforts, and changing some of our production practices potentially. So we're excited to hear from them. I'm going to let them introduce themselves first. So now we have Jen Jackson. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm Jen Jackson. I'm with the California Department of Toxic Substances Control, that thing up there, which is an agency of California Environmental Protection Agency. And I work in the Safer Consumer Products program, which has a mission of reducing toxic chemicals in consumer products. So I'm really glad to be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and my name's Ben Schleifer, he, him pronouns. I work for the Center for Environmental Health, also known as CEH, which is out of Oakland, unceded Ohlone land. I am a food coordinator. I am currently at a school in Alameda, the island. So if you hear some ambient kid noises, that's because that's where I'm at. And I'm trying to make K through 12 schools use less packaging from the toxic lens. And so I'll pass to Dorda.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. So I'm joining from the other side of the ocean. I'm policy officer on toxic-free circular economy and Zero Waste Europe. And we are basically the European network of experts of organization working towards prevention of waste and reducing it as much as possible. I think it's enough at the moment.
Definitely. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Let's just start with the big question. What are PFAS? What's the big deal? Why has this become such a buzzword right now in zero waste efforts? Who wants to start?
I can start with what is PFAS. So PFAS are a large class of chemicals. Depending on the definition, you might have as many as 12,000 of them. And they're typically characterized by a carbon-fluorine bond. Depending on the definition, again, it could be one or more. And the carbon-fluorine bond is synthesized by humans and it is extremely persistent. So it's very difficult to break that bond apart, and therefore it is persistent in the environment as well. It doesn't like to degrade very easily.
Moreover, it's got the moniker the forever chemical, and that's because the carbon fluorine bond is so strong. And so there are no real natural processes that could break it down. So once it's made and out in the environment, it just stays there.
Yeah, and I can only add that this Europe, as the rest of the world, is basically already saying that the pollution is that PFAS polluted actually environment there can be found in our body, human body. So, and just in Europe, actually, just this year there was the quite wide investigation by the journalists, and they found literally thousands of places, call them PFAS hotspots, contaminated with levels of PFAS that basically can suggest that we already can have some effects upon our health. So,
and that's a great lead in. What are those effects on our health?
I can jump in if you like.
Yes, please.
So unfortunately, we know a lot about some of them. There are 12,000 PFAS chemicals or more. So we don't know everything about all of them, but the ones we know a fair bit about, we know that they are carcinogens. They're implicated with compromising immune function. They can increase blood pressure in women who are pregnant, thyroid dysfunction, hormone disruption. These are a bad group of chemicals. And so because they resist degradation, that means they accumulate over time in the environment, and we can get exposed to more and more of them. And so the dose makes the poison. The more you're exposed to something, the more possible these kinds of health effects can happen. And so, if we can try to reduce our exposure to these harmful chemicals, then we can also reduce potentially the harms that they can create.
And moreover, they are endocrine disrupting chemicals. So they're messing with hormones is what I tell folks. And when you mess with hormones, a little bit goes a really long way. And folks who are already going through hormonal changes, i.e. young people, are even more susceptible to these endocrine disrupting chemicals once they get into the system. And so, yeah, the dose makes the poison, but it's like a lot of small doses over an extended period of time might have a more impact than an acute dose over one occurring acute dose.
And I can only add that, there was quite a lot in Europe discussion about the impact of PFAS on our immune system. Once it came, because it has been discovered by scientists, so that PFAS are affecting actually how we respond to vaccines. So we can be vaccinated, but actually our body is not really producing antibodies. And there was also a very worrying study during the period of COVID-19. There was a study from Denmark that showed that patients who were sick in the intensive care units and there were higher mortality in those patients that actually were found to also have some PFAS in their blood. So that was actually kind of, very, very worrying link that how they can affect our life, basically.
I'll just, go ahead.
You first, Jen.
I was just going to say, I'd add that we've pumped enough of these chemicals into our world that babies are born, 99% of babies are born with pre-polluted, as we unfortunately often say. They have PFAS in the umbilical cord blood. And so this is definitely a problem that we all need to be working on.
Yeah. 45% of the tap waters tested found to be high for PFAS. And it's, I think the study said 9 out of 10 folks in the US have PFAS in their blood. And they were only looking for 20 of those 12,000 PFAS.
And I said earlier, the dose makes the poison. And like Ben said, you don't need a lot of exposure to PFAS to have health harms. And so in the United States, in some states, we have made maximum contamination levels for drinking water extremely low, 1 part per trillion, which is like a drop in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. I actually think it's less than that. So it's a very little amount that we can have and still have effects.
So we've talked about what PFAS are and the harms that, that can be caused by them, but where do they come from? What is this? What kinds of things are they in? How are we getting so much contamination? What's going on?
Who wants to take it? They're in everything, it seems like. It's really problematic. So they're extremely functional chemicals. So they are used in a lot of products, unfortunately. So they confer water resistance, stain resistance. They can be put on garments, our clothing, to reduce the absorption of water, so rain jackets, etc. They are used in carpets and rugs to resist staining. They're also used in industrial equipment because they're very slippery, so it can be very helpful. So that means that things that are made with that industrial equipment can get polluted or contaminated with them, even though the thing that's being made isn't meant to have it, they can be contaminated. And then probably of most interest to this webinar is that they are often used in food packaging, whether it's things that you buy in the grocery store or takeout foodware.
Yeah, in particular, so the paper product that we call molded fiber that seems to have replaced expanded polystyrene, i.e. styrofoam, is coated, or it's not even coated, it's embedded into the paper pulp with this chemical to provide that grease and stain resistance. And so, and this has been found to be able to leach into the food that it's in contact with, particularly with acidic and hot foods. And so, the reason the food program at CEH is working diligently is because we're finding it in a lot of these paper products that are in K through 12 schools, which is extremely problematic because the kids are getting exposed to it pretty much every day.
Yeah, I can also add to just Ben said that actually we see the same situation in Europe because we have already some regulations around banning some single-use plastic items. And what you see actually that those, a lot of like packaging of, just the tableware, single-use plastic one has been actually now replaced by single-use packaging of tableware made from paper and cardboard. And exactly we have the same situation because PFAS, except of just a couple of really few compounds that are literally, banned, there are hundreds, if not thousands of different PFAS substances that are legally used, and they are used actually still in food packaging, and this is well recognized. And we had, I think, like 2 years ago, the big survey on the consumer products, and it showed all of them practically showed that the levels of fluorine showed that it's actually intentionally treated. And what was even almost tragic, that those who were labeled mostly as compostable or biodegradable, those had the highest level of those substances.
Compostables had the highest level.
Yes, actually, I mean, they were at least labeled. So you have the packaging which has certain levels, and they were actually labeled by the manufacturers as compostable and biodegradable. And actually, if you measured the concentration of PFAS, was the highest of all those paper-made packaging. So yeah, that's of course creates a lot of other problems because this packaging can directly land in the compost. In a lot of composting here when I live in our own gardens, so that's
between at-home composting and even the composting that our cities do for local agriculture, right? I know, we here where I live, we have a composting system that's community-wide, so it's, a bigger one. And yeah, I would definitely put compostable products in the compost. And then because those PFAS are so persistent, we're getting it into the soil, which maybe is being, absorbed by our food later, which is just creating this vicious cycle, which I think could be shocking for a number of people who have thought, a lot of us have thought, vendors have thought that the compostable products were the next best sustainable option, right?
Yeah, and it's Yeah, just to talk to that, like we're finding products that are in the 500, 600, even up to 900 parts per million. And the BPI Bioproducts Institute says that the cutoff is about 100 CH parts per million total fluorine. CH thinks that's too high. And when it gets into the compost, the plants grown in the compost will reuptake the PFAS. So it can get into the food, or it can get into the grass that the cows eat and then get into the cows. I have to mention also that the most famous PFAS, Teflon, has been, PFOA, was used as a non-stick coating for pans, and that would be also getting into food. And I believe the EPA has now labeled PFOA, so Teflon, as a hazardous material. And so like it's serious. That's just one of the 12,000 PFAS out there, but yeah, it's getting in. There are a lot of places it can get you can get exposed to it by.
I'll just say though, this is a lot of doom and gloom. There are some really there is some good news. A lot of states have passed laws that ban the use of PFAS in food packaging. In California, we passed AB 1200 in 2021, and it went into effect in 2023. I can't say that 100% of food packaging is compliant, but what I'm hearing is that there is less and less. So as different, a lot of nonprofits are doing a lot of testing for these chemicals in food packaging, and those levels are going down. So but we still need to be vigilant. We can't, and we also have to be a little bit concerned about what are manufacturers using instead of PFAS to confer that water and grease resistance in those compostables. So, but there is some good news. And I have a link that I could share with folks if you're interested in which states are passing laws. And I don't know if I can put it in the chat. Can I put it in the chat?
Yeah, put it in the Zoom chat and we'll add it to YouTube for our audience. No worries. Yeah. And I actually have two questions based on what y'all have said so far. Ben, you were talking about parts per million, and I think that's a really important number. Is there a safe level of parts per million of PFAS in our water, in our systems?
Quick answer, no. I mean, again, like anything that's messing with the hormonal system will be messing with your immune system, will be messing with your fertility. And like we just say, like this is a man-made chemical. It does have a lot of functionality, but we definitely existed as a species before this chemical was ever made, and we were fine. And so we don't need it. And industry keeps pushing back. We need it for the green revolution. We need it for performance and food waste. We do not need it. The goal is to turn off the tap completely.
Just talking about the safe threshold, because I mean, I always find it very tricky because it's basically very often depending on how much evidence we have. It's like in 2018, we have the European Food Safety Agency, and it introduced the safety threshold, for example, for PFOA, for like 1,500 nanograms per kilogram body per day to 4.4 nanograms per kilogram body per week. So it's like, you see that this is such a huge difference. It's only because in between certain amount of time, there's new evidence, and this is with all the chemicals. Yeah. So now, for example, not PFAS, but the European Food Safety Agency decided to, reduce the safety threshold for bisphenol A like 20,000 times. So it's like, I think it's just like, we should not believe really that authorities will say this is safe. And this is safe, because a couple of years later we can discover that actually that was not safe. We should be able to, or we should be not be exposed to a certain concentration of chemicals. So, and in case of PFAS, quite so persistent and bioaccumulate in our body. So if you want to leave this, I don't know, 90 happy years, you can only be sure that you will get more and more of them in your body. So any safe concentration will probably be crossed at some point. So I think the only way it's really to get rid of those chemicals once for good.
I'm kind of an ocean enthusiast, and I have read a couple of studies about similar chemicals that are in, waterways, and then they get out into the ocean and things. And there was this macro study that was done, and a lot of the chemicals that they study are studied in isolation in labs as far as like their effects on things, or maybe they're studied in groups of 6 or groups of 12. But as we've heard in this conversation already, there are 12,000 different kinds of PFAS. It's hard to study all of those in interaction together. And a lot of the chemicals that we are exposed to can have effects on each other and then change the way that they affect us in turn. And I think that's a really important point to make too, that scientific study has to keep going and has to keep, working on different combinations of things, because it may look safe in a lab setting in isolation, but then is it actually safe when it's exposed to all the other chemicals around it? And I think that's a really important point, that, science changes, and that's a good thing, right? We want that to change and for us to continuously get safer. But yeah, it's always better to be, on the lookout for those reductions in safety levels, for sure.
And they're coming up with I usually put it at about 1 new PFAS a day. And these studies that do health impacts take years. And so we will never be able to catch up with the amount the industry is putting out of these chemicals if we're doing it chemical by chemical. So one of the big actions is to treat this class of chemicals as a class of chemicals. Call it PFAS, per and polyfluorinated alkaline substances, define it as a carbon fluorine bond, and say these are bad, blanket statement, and they should be banned kind of outright.
Yeah, so that's actually, now I have a good news also, finally. So exactly what Ben said. So this is actually exactly the conclusion that the European, authorities came to. And we have now started the process of restriction, what's called universal restriction for PFAS. And exactly, I think that's in this dossier that's now prepared. It took a lot of time. And, experts from 5 countries to put everything together, because it's basically, if I remember, it's for around 10,000 of different substances. So really used from all over the sectors. And the idea is really just to make one good ban whenever possible. There will be some derogations for giving the industry more time, and maybe some really essentials that we don't have at the moment, the good substitutes. But basically the idea is really to treat it as one, because as Ben said, everybody realizes that we would have to have, ages really to study all those substances one by one. I don't even say how much money and animals' life will cost, etc. So yeah, so we'll see. Now it started with, this is extremely a lot of work. The consultation just closed, and there were thousands of responses with pieces of evidence. So it will take time, but I think it's really something that we are really looking for, and we are happy that this is taking place here in Europe.
Yeah, and I'd agree that it's certainly the model in the United States. I was just looking at this website, and we have something like 197 policies adopted in 33 states, and that's about PFAS and various different product categories. But you heard that there are some states there. We have 50 states. Some of them don't have any policies. So it's really a patchwork quilt in the United States. And so Europe is certainly looking at this more holistically. And while California has done a lot, we have passed a number of ban bills. So bans on PFAS and textiles, menstrual products, food packaging, and more. That doesn't mean that everybody in the United States is protected, though our economy is the 5th largest in the world. So it does have an impact on the rest of the United States, but still we really could use more holistic, comprehensive regulation of PFAS in the US.
And as California starts banning these things, they are phasing out, but they're also looking for the market of the product they already have in production. So the states that don't have bans are probably going to get inundated with foodware that is PFAS laden. And California is doing a lot of good work, but Governor Newsom just vetoed banning PFAS in AstroTurf. And again, I work in a lot of schools. Most turf has PFAS in it. And the rationale was we couldn't enforce that. And that's very problematic, because it would be very hard to enforce, but these are our kids' health. So having a blanket ban on producing this chemical is really kind of key, because it will start popping up in places we don't really intend it, or we can't enforce it and don't want it to be.
I think those are really important points. And even if, the whole of the US or the whole of Europe banned these products, as Ben said, they'll get shipped to other places. So it's important to, to be part of like bilateral communications as well, if at all possible on an international level, so that these things are not affecting other people's health in other communities as well. This actually brings me to a question about your organization's work, and kind of a twofold question. The alternatives that we see for the products that do have PFAS in them, are we getting good, healthy, sustainable products as an alternative? What are the alternatives? I think on different scales, like for me as an individual, for schools, for example, and for vendors, restaurants, things like that, and then maybe on a government level for green purchasing policies and things like that. So maybe we can kind of go up the tier, starting at the individual level.
So we know what are the alternatives to PFAS then? Well, I mean, we always say that, like, for example, as mentioned already, the one big problem, for example, I will just stick to the food packaging, because this is something I work a lot at the moment. Yeah, the one of the main sources is actually food packaging is the single-use throwaway paper and cardboard packaging. So we talk about pizza boxes, we talk about this, about fiber bowls, etc. And there is a simple way. Just you have to use different material. You can what we very much promote now, because also we have a lot now focus on circular economy. We really, as Europe, want to have more sustainable consumption, production, and then by this automatically also reduce waste. It's just moving, for example, to reusable packaging, and there is really we move then to packaging that is that it's designed, can be well tested, can be used many times, and you can go to materials like per definition much more saved glass, ceramic, porcelain, whatever you use in restaurant also. So it's a lot of going on this direction, I think. So the alternative doesn't have to be other chemicals, the paper or the I don't know, the polymer. What they do, they just use this lining of the plastic, but it's just different material and different packaging system, which actually gives a lot of other added value. Not only you get of PFAS, we get rid of a lot of other chemicals, and you get rid of waste. So yeah, that's that's my dream to come.
Sorry for the kids. It is a cultural shift too, right? We've been used to packaging for a couple decades. Plastic companies in the 50s was like, yeah, everything's throwaway now. And then they marketed it to us. And like, the nice thing about the toxic lens is that it really does help the waste lens, because it's like teaching 5-year-olds to sort waste is very hard. And then if you have a reusable system, it becomes much easier. Everything goes in the compost of its food. And then if there's one recycled milk carton, good. And so looking at it at a system level, moving to reusables is the best thing you can do as an individual or as a system, because you, like Dorda said, you can just test that one product and then you kind of know for sure, and then it gets used like 1,000+ times. Remember that when you keep buying and then throwing away, they will change their products without telling anyone pretty much once every 2 years. And like, that's very problematic. We can't keep up with that level of testing. So this is a solution where you have to just move upstream. So it's not going to recycle your way out of this one. We have to start thinking about reduction and reuse extensively to kind of turn off the tap, as it were.
Yeah, and I'll just add that the less we consume, the less waste and pollution we'll generate, whether it's PFAS or all other kinds. So to make these single-use products, a lot of other emissions are emitted. So there's CO2, greenhouse gases, et cetera. So it helps on a lot of fronts to reduce the use of single-use packaging and single-use everything. And there are other things too that we can do, you know, when it comes to other waste streams like textiles. We can take care of our clothes. We can not buy fast fashion and instead buy things that are well made, but maybe have fewer of them, mend them, tailor them when you maybe outgrow them, or if you get thinner. We all wish we were. So, you know, these are things that we can do to reduce the waste stream in general, and then thereby reduce the demand for these chemicals. We know that they are so problematic. And so consumers have an obligation, in fact, to send a message to the market. We don't want these things in our products, and we're going to stop buying them. We're not going to use them anymore. And, you know, we've heard from industry that has said, we have to use them. This is what consumers demand. And I know it's hogwash. So we really have to reframe that for industry to say what we want is safer products. And we don't want you dropping in some replacement chemical that's just as harmful. Regrettable substitutes get us nowhere. And we really need them to be thinking more holistically. I love that Ben put in the chat, the green screen chemicals certified. It's a certification for what replacement chemicals might be okay for food packaging. And that, yes, we will still have food packaging, but the takeout foodware we can certainly avoid in many cases. And where it is needed, let's make sure that manufacturers are actually putting in a safer alternative, not just any alternative.
Yeah, and just to talk about the green screen. So something you can do at a purchaser level is whoever your manufacturer is or your producer is, you tell them, I want green screen certified. This tests for not only PFAS to make sure the product doesn't have PFAS, but also 10,000 other chemicals of concern that could be in the products. And that will help industry realize that customers don't want these performance chemicals that can impact their health. And so it just sends a nice message to them about that.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, unfortunately, we still don't have this kind of certification in Europe, but probably because we are planning to ban all of the PFAS. But basically, what we also see here is this movement to the sustainable procurement, and this is very much put. We also have some kind of like a directive, some law that is incentivized using this green procurement criteria. So basically, it's expected that at least, first of all, public, authorities, whatever public institutions, they would use it. So they should actually always put attention and ask for more, well, you could say ecological, but healthy. They can ask, you can put the criteria just before buying any products. Yeah, so this is happening already. And just maybe then on the other side, we actually also have like a growing movement of investors and companies that are like making commitments, but it's what making commitments is one thing, but we have a very beautiful initiative that is actually led by other NGO called Chemsec. So it's Swedish-based NGO, and they actually actively stimulate. They created and they support. They work a lot with this business group. So and they have. I think they call like PFAS free. If I'm not really now, but anyway, it's all about at the moment the PFAS. But of course, I think that this can go broader. Yeah, I mean it's like so those. This is like actively really the more investors. I think the most companies. They're saying we don't want this and this chemical, we don't want this, garbage, we don't want this, we don't want to buy it. As I said, this is even more impact than just single consumers would do it. So I think we can really do a lot if we do it collectively.
I think those are really interesting, like different approaches that we're seeing between the US and Europe. So we have kind of a top-down approach where just bans are going to happen across the board from the European side. And then we have this like lots of certifications and kind of more carrot rather than stick kind of methods that I think also maybe put a little more onus on the consumer to find out about these certifications, to find out about what's better for my health, which ones should I choose? And I think that takes some mental energy as well, rather than it being automatically there, on the shelf as an option. So things to think about for
Can I talk to that just a little
Yeah.
bit? And so it's like there should be a regulatory agency in the US that's been watching after this. FDA would probably be the main one. And the Food and Drug Administration, once they approve a chemical, let's say it was in the 70s, they never really go back and check to see if it's okay, even if the science has improved, even if the detection limits have improved, which they have for a variety of these chemicals. And so it's like the FDA still says BPAs are okay for the most part. And that's problematic that we have this regulatory agency that is very old school, for lack of a better word, that can't keep itself updated. And like, I would much rather be able to just be like, it's illegal, the FDA says so you can't buy that product. Would make my life way easier than being like, look at all our carrots that we have to help you move to a safer chemical. That would just be a better system. But we don't have it currently in the US, and it's going to be a heavy lift to get there. But it should be what we're striving for 100%.
And I will say that these certification organizations, I think they, in the absence of a really comprehensive regulatory system in the United States, they really do serve. So where we have banned, say, PFAS in food packaging or textiles, these certifications, especially if they're robust and look at things comprehensively, they can then help manufacturers avoid a regrettable substitute. So with Green Screen, they're looking at a wide range of chemicals, not just PFAS, as Ben mentioned. So that's very helpful. And there are a number of other certification organizations that have similar approaches. And so I think from the manufacturer's perspective, they've invested all this time and energy to make a product the way they make it. And then we ban it, they're very likely to just find a chemical that looks and operates, functions very similarly to the one that was just banned. And we need to help them not do that, because often when a chemical is very structurally similar, it has similar problems too. And so we need to help them shift to the actual safer alternatives. Our program, the Safer Consumer Products Program, the way we work is we actually, when we regulate a product and a chemical in combination with each other, we require manufacturers to do something called an alternatives analysis. So they're supposed to look comprehensively at what maybe they can do instead. They could maybe change their manufacturing process and not use PFAS chemicals in the machinery, for example. That could help reduce contamination. So there are a lot of different ways to approach it, but this comprehensive holistic view is really important so that we don't just have regrettable substitutes.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and actually brings me to another question, which this is about PFAS and specifically to-go-ware, like food containers and food packaging. Thinking about, not just making these tweaks that also are potentially harmful to our health, thinking about changing systems and really getting into zero waste and the circular economy. Looking forward into the future, what does to-go-ware look like if it's not PFAS, if it's not single use, if it's not compostable? Like, what is that dream world where we have this little bit of convenience, or we could still get takeout, or we can still get our sushi to go? Like, is that still a possibility in a circular economy and that type of to-go-ware? What does that look like?
Well, yes. So in Europe, there are growing the system of those reusable food containers. So they're made to be used many times. So and there are different systems in different places. It can be just deposit return system. So you're just paying a little bit extra when you're taking your food away, and then you are turning back your container, you're getting back your money. Sometimes you even don't have to pay a deposit. It's like this, you work with some kind of app that you have like 1 week or something to give it back, and if you give it back, it's fine. If you don't give it back, then you pay. And there are many different systems, but those systems are already existing, and they even actually now in Europe we have more and more the pizza boxes, the reusable pizza boxes. But a lot of those kind of like for soup, for sushi, or for the pasta, also the reusable cups you can have for your coffee. This already exists. It's still it's still actually relatively small scale. And so this is something that we, as Zero Waste Europe, the whole network, all our partners in Europe are working now hard trying to scale up the system, because this is actually the best. Also is actually for environment, and we have a huge problem with waste. I think you also have the same problem. We are actually not so champions in recycling as we like to say. We still send a lot of waste outside Europe. We are still burning and landfilling a lot of waste. So it's plastic, even if they make some progress, it's still just very small fraction is recycled. So basically the thing is that today we have to shift to more sustainable consumption. We have to just make really circular things that are really circulating in the loop, and then at some point are becoming waste. It's not really circularity is for us not just single use, it's recycled. This is recycling is important, but really the reuse reduction is the higher. We have like a waste hierarchy in Europe, so it's also very interesting. So that's how we see actually for food packaging can work very well, but we need systemic change, because now we need collective washing, etc. So this is another subject I don't want to talk too much, but we have a lot of already data and a lot of interesting publications and ideas how it can actually go better in the future.
Yeah, the idea that we need takeout is also a little, I would like to challenge that. We've been pushing back a lot against fast fashion in the industry, but fast food has been kind of embedded for a really long time. But I work at schools where the kids have about 20 minutes to eat lunch, and they're also asked to sort their waste, and they also have a recess that's really a high incentive for them to get to. We don't need to be teaching kids young as 5 that you need to eat quickly and then take the food with you if you can. And we usually don't let them do that. Like honoring food is really important. It's a climate solution. And it's like, we should really be thinking about like, if we're going to eat an animal that gave its life, should we be doing it in 20 minutes when not having a moment to think about it? And so, yeah, I would like to push back on the idea that takeout is a must, but there are some certain instances where it's helpful. Like when COVID came around, like everyone was at home, plastic companies said, oh yeah, the only safe stuff is plastic. And then we saw this huge influx of single-use plastic across the market. They put it out with bunk science, and it's like, we got to be challenging these moments anytime that there's like, oh yeah, the only thing that is safe is plastic wrapped food, because that is not, that has been shown to be, if you do the deep dive in the science, not the case. But yeah, there's also to-go containers that look very similar to what you would get that's single use that you can be reused. We have to figure out a return system. Again, we don't love plastic, but sometimes the clamshells, it's the polypropylenes, sometimes the only game in town, as it were. And then figuring out how they get washed and how they get returned is a whole thing. I've been advocating that using K through 12 schools as a hub to replace return takeout stuff that you might order over DoorDash or Grubhub. And when you drop off your kids, they also drop off the dishes in a bin where they can get washed and then put back into the system. That to me is a really interesting system that we could explore. But right now, what we currently have is just not working from the waste end as well as from the toxic end.
I totally agree with what's been said. And I would just say that, we have moved into sort of convenience foods, but I'll also say that the impact of those nice convenience foods is a very inconvenient cancer, health impacts. And so it would really behoove us to rethink those systems. But as far as if, you do need to get something for takeout, or you want to take something home to eat, hopefully slowly. During COVID, there was a real reduction in the use of reusables because of what Ben mentioned. A lot of health departments said, oh no, you're not allowed to bring your own container into places. But in California, a lot of counties before COVID had started to allow people to bring in their reusable container if that restaurant had a separate area for filling that container, just to keep it, so contamination wouldn't happen in a kitchen. That largely shut down during COVID. I hope that counties are considering reopening that so that people can bring in their own containers, glass, stainless steel, things that are almost infinitely reusable. So we can also move away from reusable plastics, because we really want to reduce the use of plastics overall. They eventually do break down into small microplastics, and that's really problematic. So if we can move into these longer term solutions, there's some really wonderful examples. City of Portland has a food truck area that has an amazing reuse program where you can go and eat at a food truck, you get your food in a reusable container and you put it back and it gets washed and reused over and over and over again. And I think more communities need to be thinking about how do we support and incentivize these systems. City of San Francisco is working on a number of incentives to help restaurants go to reusables and to help support reusable industries. So people who will come around and pick up those containers and dishware and wash them and then bring them back to restaurants.
And so just what Jensen just remind me that actually we have, this is not really European level, it's depending on national, sometimes it's regulated by the city, but it's more and more initiatives also that forcing, like for example, like a public events to use reusable. And that's mostly, it's like, you know, the cup for your beer during the music festival. And from this year, for example, we know that in Germany, there is a requirement that all the football, so this is the European football, soccer one, big events, this is huge, very popular sport with thousands of people come to watch, that actually all those events also have to use like reusable cups, because that's a place where also a lot of beer is drunk. So it's actually, you know, and this is really, you know, allowed to use at a short time. So and it's, of course, it needs some preparation. This is this washing. People are normally really very worried about hygiene stuff, but we don't know really any case that there was anything, you know, happening badly, where there were like thousands of people running on the festival field and drinking or eating from reusable, you know, food containers. So I think it all depends actually how you are preparing yourself and how you're dealing with these containers.
I'll just add, and this maybe Ben can speak to this a little bit more. A lot of schools in the 80s and 90s eliminated their dishwashers. They changed out their commercial kitchens and went to completely disposable systems. And that's a really big tragedy. And so I know that CEH and other organizations are advocating for schools to put back those dishwashers, and restaurants should be doing the same. We probably shouldn't be permitting restaurants that focus solely on single use and you know, takeout, that they should have dishwashers. It provides employment. There's some really, you know, it's a ladder kind of job. You start out as a dishwasher and you can move up. So I think that we can think about this, again, I keep using the word holistically, but we think about the whole economy and we build systems so that we have more employment and we're also protecting the environment.
Yeah, and a lot of the folks in, sorry, I'll give it right back to you, Hayden, but a lot of the folks who are working in the nutrition world or the food service world are being exposed to these chemicals too. They're often folks of color, they're often women, and they're often low income. And so they're all also should be uplifted. They should be given, you know, a full-time job and should be, you know, honored for the work of feeding people. And right now, when we go to this convenience model, they're just not. And this is why that all the dish machines were ripped out of schools in the 80s via the Reagan administration. There was a drought. They didn't want the schools, and they just kept underfunding the National School Lunch Program. And again, that is a program just to feed kids. Why would we underfund this? This is a good program. We should be overfunding it, if anything else.
That actually brings me to a question about reusables. So we have a question from the chat that says, is there any risk of PFAS exposure with reusables? So is this something that we should be watching out for as we begin to implement this kind of return system and circular economy?
Yes, if I may, Jen, yeah, in general, we do not know what's going into a plastic product. So a lot of like melamine can cause kidney stones, polycarbonate will leach BPA. Some large plastic barrels, think like your Costco bulk, get pumped with fluorine gas, and that fluorine gas is not intended to add PFAS, but it pretty much puts a coating around the inside of the polyethylene product that is the equivalent of PFOA. And so it's like, I would be concerned if you're using a plastic reusable product, and you should get it checked. We also have a green screen certified for reusables that is going to be coming out. It's already been launched, but the webinar is on the 1st of November, and I can put links for that. But Jen, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I was just going to say that, yeah, there is some concern. Certain plastics may be produced, especially if they're very thin plastics, they may be produced with fluorochemicals so that they can make, so they can extrude these plastics easily. So there could be contamination of plastics. And also there's recycling of plastics back into plastic. And so if there's contamination from some source, then it can be recycled back into the system. So I personally really prefer to use glass and stainless steel where possible. Glass can sometimes be a little heavier, but you know, stainless steel often is very, very light. A lot of the events that Dorota was talking about, at least in the US, they're providing stainless steel cups. Like you might go to an event and as part of your entrance fee, you pay more for, if you didn't bring your own cup, you can pay for a metal cup that's almost infinitely reusable. So, and those, you know, don't leach harmful chemicals. So those are the things I personally like to use.
Yeah, I agree that, yeah, it's indeed this reusable system can use different materials, and glass is still minimalistically used because also a lot of food providers don't like it because it's breakable and it's everything about weight, so it's more carbon footprint, etc. Metal is getting more and more indeed popular, but to be honest, actually majority is still on polypropylene and polyethylene, so it's plastic. It's reusable containers are thicker, and we know that there is indeed some PFAS are used during the polymerization. But honestly, we have to still look, I think, in this. So that's also one a little bit, you know, area of how in Europe food contact materials are regulated. It's a little bit problematic. We have the regulation, but we miss a lot of specific rules still, and this law is under review. So, and I think also one of the part also of this review is to really better address reusable system, because basically in the last 3 decades we shift almost, you know, almost practically 100% to single use. So that was not really much interest. But now also more and more authorities see that we need also a little bit better testing. So because of course it's different tests for single use, things for reusables when you have a lot of cycles, so you have to check. We have already going a research program paid by the European Commission, big research program which involves scientists and of both industry, those providing. So I think in a couple of years we'll have a lot of good data. So we shall see. But I cannot really. We're all having our worries and concerns about using plastic in the reusables as well.
Yeah, I think we're constantly in a process of just like, okay, what's the next best step as we move forward and hopefully progress and get a little bit better for both the environment and for our health. And then we have a few minutes left, but I have one more question from the chat, which is, what are the top 5 items that people should avoid when it comes to PFAS? So we have talked about foodware and to-go ware and food packaging specifically, but if we think about 5 items, like 5 things that maybe we see pretty regularly at the grocery store or in our lives that we can maybe avoid, hopefully not something that's super necessary to us for our, you know, lives in general, but things that are avoidable. What would those things be?
Certain rain jackets have been lined with it. REI stopped selling stuff that was coated with PFAS, I think last year or this year. So that can help with that. Firefighting foam is very problematic. And so if you live near a fire station, you should definitely get your water tested. Also near airports, they use that kind of foam, and that can also leach into the groundwater. We found it at the bottom of microwave popcorn bags. So I always tell people just to stop doing the microwave popcorn. And then anything that says non-stick coating for cookware, I just say avoid. I'm only using cast iron at this point in my life. And like I just don't trust it. And they could be like PFAS free, no intentionally added PFAS, PFOA free. And I'm not just like, I don't want to, I'm just doing cast iron and I will wash it good afterwards and I can deal without the non-stickness. So those were my 5 items.
Oh my God, I don't know if I have 5. I was saying the pizza boxes. So for those who like it, because they are made from paper, cardboard, and honestly, there is no plastic that has to be PFAS. And something that now I discovered is actually during the COVID, the mask, you have this spray to put on your glasses to avoid this kind of like, how you say it in English? Not
like fogging up.
Fogging. That's actually also they put the people so they so there are sometimes small things, dental floss, PFAS, and I'm actually flossing my teeth because you think that is more important. But actually, it's sad, but they're everywhere. So I don't know if I should say avoid dental floss. Maybe I don't know. It's a bit of crazy thing, but that's actually showing how far we went on using these chemicals in everyday products. Actually, are very that we use it because also to support us in many times. So yeah,
There's definitely dental floss that is not like that.
I was gonna
if
say
you
the
buy it with-
compostable one that I have, like, I wonder if it has anything in it.
Probably, I mean, a lot of dental floss is made, good dental floss is made with actual string, and then will be coated. And but some of the ones that are called that are supposed to easily slide, so they'll say super slippery or glide, etc. Those may be made with Teflon, but there are some that are made with beeswax, and that's a really nice way to plus. My other addition to the list that you've already heard is stain treatments for textiles. They're often sprayed, and so you can have an exposure to those chemicals through inhalation. So I think that they're a very optional thing in most of our lives. Maybe if you live in a really rainy place, you can use other products that aren't sprayed in particular. And I look for the word flour, F-L-O-U-R, to see if F-L-U-O-R, I believe, to see if there's fluorochemicals in a product. So you can try to avoid them by looking for those letters.
That sounds great. Yeah, those are all really interesting products to be on the lookout for. I'm getting a an cast iron skillet. Like I was already thinking about it, and now it's happening. So that's going to be maybe my Christmas gift to myself.
Another thing people are starting to use, sometimes cast iron is really heavy. If you're young, it's not a big deal, but as you age, it may be more difficult to use cast iron. There's something called carbon steel, which is very lightweight. It's often used in commercial kitchens and restaurants. A lot of chefs love it, and it's very similar to cast iron. You season it, and over time it becomes more and more oil, and they're sort of stick resistant. So that's another option for folks who are looking for something a little more lightweight.
That sounds great. All right. Well, we have 1 minute left. So really quickly in the time that remains, I just want to give you all like one last word. If there's something that you would like to do, that you would like to say to our audience to take action for Zero Waste Month, to reduce waste, to reduce toxics, what are your parting words?
I always say that this is heavy, and so start small, start where you can, and just start the conversation. Like find a group you can start the conversation with, and make a goal and see if you can get there.
In my world, I'm surrounded by conversations about toxins, and so people always ask me, what can I do to reduce my exposures? And I say, just simplify your life. Try to spend more time eating your food, cooking your food, going to the grocery store and buying food, and spend more time with your family and friends. You'll consume a lot less.
I totally agree with John. I think less is more, and we can just just last example, like the drinking paper, it's the drinking straw. We moved from plastic to paper, but actually, first question is, do we need it really? And I think we can reduce our consumption, and we can move a lot of stuff from our life. And actually, what I was saying to people, dare to ask whatever you buy. Ask, you can start to send the emails to manufacturers. If they will get thousands of emails, do you use PFAS? That they maybe they will start to think about it quicker than you think.
Yeah, I think those are the rethink and reduce. Those are at the top of the zero waste hierarchy. So thank you, Dorota. I think that was the exact perfect way to end. So that's your action for this week for our theme for PFAS and to go where. Rethink and reduce, for sure. And share your actions on social media. Let us know what you learned. Let us know what actions you take, and follow these great organizations and the work that they're doing. Be sure to join us next week for Building Equity into Coalitions, which will be our final Zero Waste Month interview / panel, which will take place at the National Zero Waste Conference. So look forward to that. We'll put the registration link for that in the chat as well. And thank you so much to everyone who was here, both in the audience, in the future, and especially to our expert guests.
Thanks a lot.